America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation.
And I'm Alfredo Ortiz, CEO of Job Creators Network.
Please subscribe to the show at salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcast from. Well, Alfredo, today we have Dr. Tom Price on with us today. And he is, as you know, a great friend and also was an orthopedic surgeon and most recently served as the 23rd Secretary of Health and Human Services under the Trump administration. He brought to the department a lifetime of service and a dedication to advancing the quality of healthcare in America, both as a physician and a policymaker. So looking forward to talking to him. He's been such a great partner to us at Job Creators Network, particularly in the healthcare policy fight.
Yeah, absolutely. He has just been an incredible supporter of JCN and what he knows and the depth of knowledge in this field is just, it's just unbelievable.
Absolutely. I wonder if he misses it being in Congress.
I bet you he doesn't, but we'll
have to ask
him
him
that, won't we? Yeah.
We'll have to ask him. I wanted to bring up with you the $20 fast food minimum wage that is going to be passed in California and signed into law by the governor. $20 an hour minimum wage in the fast food industry.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, the average franchisee, small business owner, I mean, I just don't know how they're going to survive with inflation, with the labor cost increase. I mean, all the regulations that are being thrown at it. I mean, it's just, it's a head scratcher. And, I think businesses are just going to start closing. I mean, it's just, they can't maintain these levels.
Well, not only that, I mean, I have teenagers, or I had teens. My last one just finally isn't a teen anymore. But when she was looking for her first job, at 16 years old, I mean, she wasn't worth $20 an hour. She didn't have any skills. I was sending her out to get a job to learn how to show up on time and learn how to talk to people and learn customer service and your basic skills so that she could climb the ladder. I mean, that's the entry level job so that you can gain those skills.
Well, and if you remember, a few years back, we worked with some large franchisees, looking into kind of their cost structure and stuff like that. I mean, that they literally make pennies on a dollar, first and foremost, and that the first 6 to 8 months of that new worker is really training, and that they actually lose money effectively by bringing them in and doing that training for 6 to 8 months. And there's so much turnover that it really is, something that they barely basically break even on that first that first in employee basically, and with all the training and the turnover. And, it's just, look, I mean, market conditions again should dictate, what people pay and what people are willing to accept. I mean, you look at, for example, a great franchise, it's not even franchise, but Chick-fil-A in the restaurant business. I mean, they have one of the lowest turnovers amongst employees amongst the entire industry. And that's because they do a great job of treating their employees. It's not just necessarily a high minimum wage. It's just the training, the skill sets that they learn. I mean, so allow the free enterprise in the market to make that happen.
Actually, my daughter worked for Chick-fil-A and she said it was a really good company to work for. She worked part-time during college. It was great extra spending money. They do pay well, actually. For the level of skill. But
that's not because they're mandated, but that's because they chose to do that. And that's the difference.
Right.
And their
exactly.
business, by the way, and their business model allows for that because Chick-fil-A is also probably one of the highest dollar ring in the industry. But again, consumers now are willing to pay for that because they're getting great value for the dollar.
Well, I can't imagine how much burgers are going to cost out in California when this passes, and the fast food industry has to pay $20 an hour for their employees. So, hey folks, Elaine Parker here from Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. National security experts are warning, our aging power grid is more vulnerable than ever. January marked the third time a power station in North Carolina was damaged by gunfire recently. Authorities are saying the attack, quote, raises a new level of threat, unquote. Authorities are now checking our grid for vulnerabilities. They've identified 9 key substations. If these substations are attacked, power could be knocked out from coast to coast for up to 18 months. Imagine a blackout lasting not days, but weeks or months. Your life would be frozen in time right at the moment the power fails. Lights all over the country would go out, throwing people into total darkness. That's why having your own solar power is more important than ever. With the Patriot Power Generator, you get a solar generator that doesn't install into your house because it's portable. You can take it with you, even use it inside. But it's powerful enough for your phones, medical devices, or even your fridge. And now you can go to 4patriots.com and use code STREET to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store, including the Patriot Power Generator. You'll also get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order, plus free shipping on orders over $97. And a portion of every sale is donated to charities who support our veterans and their families. Just go to 4patriots.com and use code STREET to get 10% off. It is time for our interview with Dr. Tom Price. Just let me give you a little background on him. Dr. Price received his Bachelor and Doctor of Medicine degrees from the University of Michigan and completed his general surgery internship and orthopedic surgery residency at Emory University. After his training, Dr. Price, a third-generation physician following in the footsteps of his father and grandfather, began a solo medical practice in Atlanta, Georgia, which would eventually grow to be one of the largest non-academic orthopedic practices in the country, which he led as chairman of the board. During his 20-plus years as a practicing physician, he also served as medical director of the Orthopaedic Clinic at Grady Memorial Hospital, as well as an assistant professor at Emory University School of Medicine. Dr. Price also served as the U.S. representative for Georgia's 6th Congressional District from northern suburban Atlanta. He held this office from 2005 to 2017 and earned a reputation amongst his colleagues for being a tireless problem solver and the go-to expert on healthcare matters. And he was also the Secretary of Health and Human Services under President Trump. Tom, welcome to Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Elaine. It is great to be with you, and thanks for what you and Alfredo and the whole team at Job Creators is doing. So it's so incredibly important.
And yes, thank you, Dr. Price. It's such a pleasure to see you. I know you and I have known each other for almost 20 years now. I was just looking at some of the original outreach that I did to you way back when I decided to join the fight. And
yeah, well, it's a fight that needs to be had, and it's a fight that needs to be won. So we got to keep in it. So again, thanks for all that JCN does. I mean, on every front, especially in healthcare.
Well, thank you. Well, Dr. Price, you have held you've had such an incredible career, orthopedic surgeon, congressman, HHS secretary under the Trump administration. As you look back on all of your posts that you've held, particularly in Congress, you held so many leadership roles: chairman of the House Budget Committee, chairman of the House Republican Policy Committee, chairman of the Republican Study Committee. What thoughts do you have on, well, first I should ask you, Do you miss it? And then what thoughts do you have on those committees now, just looking back on your time there?
Yeah, I had an incredible privilege and honor of serving in the public sector. Served 8 years in our state Senate here in Georgia. Was the first Republican majority leader in the history of the state after the '02 election. Went to Congress in '04 and then on to the cabinet in 2017. So was elected 7 times to the House of Representatives. An incredible honor. And folks ask me if I miss it, and I guess my favorite line is one that I can't remember who said it, but it's I don't miss the circus, but I miss the clowns. And so you miss the people, you miss the relationships that you made, you miss the folk, the battles that you were in, that are so pivotal. But the machinations, the logistics of what's going on right now in Congress. Just looks very foreign to the way that it probably ought to be from a public policy making standpoint. I had the privilege of serving as the Republican Study Committee chair. It's when the Republican Study Committee, and this was in 09-10, when the RSC was kind of the conservative bastion in the House. It was the largest caucus in the House at that time. We were given great latitude. It was during Obamacare, and we were just given huge amount of latitude by the leader at that time, John Boehner, and so that it was a great time to be engaged and involved, and we were part of the group that formulated the largest conservative response, if you will, Republican response to Obamacare, and came up with legislation that I then authored for, almost 7 or 8 years, called the Empowering Patients First Act, which was a bill to try to make certain that patients and families and doctors were in charge of healthcare and not the federal government. The policy committee was a great position as well. It allowed me to have an opportunity to engage in all sorts of different policies across the spectrum, and to help lead our conference in a positive solutions direction. And then as budget committee chair, that you can't be, there's not a better perch from which to engage in Congress than as budget committee chair, because everything that goes through from a budgetary standpoint has to come through that committee. And so it was a real privilege, real honor. And as I say, I miss the people. I don't miss the rancor that seems to have been increasing of late.
Well, Dr. Price, I'm here in D.C. actually right now, and I can assure you that the clowns are actually still running the place, and are still running around, I should say. So, unfortunately, it's not a figure of speech. It's actually a literal clowns running the place now. So we got to get them out of there.
It's a real shame. It's a real shame, and there's so many important tasks at hand that absolutely must be addressed. And we've lived on the north side of Atlanta for over 45 years now, 40 years, and when I'm no longer in the public arena as a representative or as a public official, but I do talk to folks all the time and am engaged. And there's the remarkable frustration, as you well know, Elaine and Alfredo, especially in the business community, about what's being done, because there's so many impediments to allowing free market capitalism and people to succeed in their lives all across the spectrum, all across the economic and political spectrum. And there's so many impediments that continue to exist and frankly expand from a federal government standpoint. So it's why we've got to continue to be in the battle, because if we aren't, if you aren't, if kindred souls aren't, then there will be fewer people that will realize their dreams in this country. And it's been such a wonderful opportunity for folks, and we need to make certain that continues.
And Dr. Price, I'm just curious, as you go out there talking to the people, whether it's in your old stomping grounds or across the country, because I know you're all over as well, speaking and stuff like that. What are you hearing from the American public?
Yeah, it's I think frustration is the word. People just cannot believe that we've gotten to the point where we apparently are no longer able to fundamentally address problems that exist and challenges that exist, and seemingly we're unable to work together in a cooperative way. When I was in Congress, I used to the rancor wasn't as bad then, but it was still present. But I used to say to my colleagues at that time, every one of us was elected to Congress because the folks back home, the constituents back home, felt that we had something to offer. And most individuals in Congress, regardless of their political stripe, had been successful in something. It's the way that they gained attention from their constituents, from their neighbors. But somehow it seems to be that when you get to Washington, and Newt used to talk about this, when you get to Washington, people seem to check their expertise, the thing that brought them to the success in their own life, professional or personal, and they seem to check that at the door. And they don't go back to those things that both of you know well, and your client companies, your member companies know so well, that the things that allow them to succeed, allow them to put their business in a competitive position to succeed from a business standpoint, that requires certain talents and expertise, and those talents and that expertise is possessed by people who are in Congress. It's just that they don't seem to rely on it when they get to DC, sadly.
The other thing that I wonder if you might comment on is how the media plays a role here, and the difference from when you were in Congress to now, and how you think, just sort of the media is literally an arm of the Democratic Party, and they're so hard to break through, and it's just very difficult. So I just wonder if you could make some comparisons between the two times.
Well, it was present then as well. It's much more so now, but I'm an old fogey, so I remember when Walter Cronkite, at the end of his 30-minute news program once a day, would say, "And that's the way it is," and you kind of had a sense that all the important, truthful information that the public needed to have, it had been imparted in that previous 30 minutes. And when we went to the 24-hour news cycle a couple decades ago, the media folks say they just have to feed the beast, and so they feed the beast, and more often than not, they want controversy as opposed to collegiality, and they want conflict instead of folks getting along, and the left is in charge of the vast majority of the media apparatus in this country. And consequently, they push their own agenda, and it's very sad, because what happens is then, our form of government, our representative democracy, only works if people are able to be informed and well informed and objectively informed. And when that's not possible, and it doesn't seem to be possible now, then it becomes that much more difficult to actually get individuals in the system that and elected to public office that will actually be able to work with others and solve these problems. So I think the media, the fourth estate, is a major cause of the rancor and the lack of discipline from a public policy solution standpoint that we see right now.
Well, it's like a fourth branch of the government.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they have a job to do, and candidly, they're not doing it.
No, they're doing the job of the current government when they get their talking points in the morning.
That's right.
Because you can flip through MSNBC, CNN, and it's like exactly the same thing being said, and so it is unfortunate. As Job Creators Network, that is what we try to do, though, in terms of being the megaphone of truth, actually, and trying to get the American public to understand what is actually truth. And what are really fables that are being spun by this administration.
You all do a great job, and it's so incredibly important. And Job Creators has been at the forefront of being able to educate folks, especially small business employers and employees. I remember when you all first started it was really fundamental information, education about what allows a business to be a business and what allows the economy to succeed, not both from a micro and a macro standpoint. And unless people understand that, unless businesses understand that, unless politicians understand that, policymakers understand that, then it's tough to formulate those public policy solutions that allow then that kind of success for small businesses and the entire country.
Well, you were the 23rd Secretary of Health and Human Services. So you went from Congress to Secretary Cabinet position. Tell us about your time at HHS and maybe some highlights or just a little bit while you were there, because it's, healthcare is so important to Americans.
Yeah, it was really an incredible privilege to serve in that position. When I was called by the president-elect and asked to serve in that post, there just wasn't any answer but yes, and so it was a great honor to serve as Secretary of Health and Human Services, the largest department in the federal government, a budget at that time of over $1.1 trillion, 80,000 employees around the world, literally around the world. And it has under it, the umbrella under it, all of the iconic health institutions that we know about. So FDA and CMS and CDC and all of them, NIH and National Cancer Institute, all of them are under HHS. And there's so many dedicated folks who are working just as hard as they can to try to solve those problems that exist from a health and human services standpoint in our country. I tried to bring a physician's perspective. I tried to bring a problem-solving perspective that addressed kind of the scientific method, that we looked at what the problem was. We tried to put forward a hypothesis, how it would work, tried to put it in place, and then measure whether or not it worked, and then change it if it didn't work. That's a logical, methodical process to solve problems that sadly doesn't exist much in Washington, D.C. What I also brought to the table was a clinical perspective, one that said, I want us to look through the prism of the physician-patient relationship, and something that I've held near and dear to my heart through my clinical practice and through my time in the state Senate and in Congress and then at HHS, that clinical decisions, medical decisions ought to be made by patients and families and doctors and nobody else. Others ought to get out of the way, regardless of who's paying for it. We need to make certain that patients have the confidence and the trust in their physician that he or she is making the wisest recommendation to them that they can, not based upon what they're told to do, but based upon what they know and learned and have from an experience standpoint. Early on in my time at HHS, I pulled together the 26 the heads of the 26 different entities and my senior leadership, and I charged them to look through that prism, physician-patient relationship, and come back with solutions. And one of the fellows came back a couple weeks later. I don't even remember what the topic was, but they hadn't done what I had requested that they do, and that is look through that prism. And there was this long pause, and he looked at me and he said, "Oh, you're serious, aren't you?" And I remember thinking, this is going to be a challenge, changing the mindset of so many individuals in the federal government who tend to be in their own vacuum. And although they're good people, they're quality people, they're knowledgeable people, but they tend not to have a directive from the leadership of both parties, frankly, that recognizes that it's people and from a healthcare standpoint, people and their physicians who ought to be in charge, and not the federal government or insurance companies.
Yeah. Well, the good news, though, Dr. Price, is that with the advent and introduction of the Affordable Care Act, we now have a more efficient, effective, and affordable healthcare system.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't even say that with a straight face.
Alfredo, you've used that joke before, and so I'm not going to bite on it.
I can't even say it with a straight face.
Well, sadly, and it's not just the Affordable Care Act, as you well know. well, maybe most of the solutions that are put forward from Washington's standpoint tend to be not solutions that actually recognize who ought to be in charge of all this. So I mean, you look at the volumes of regulations that are put in place day after day after day after day from Washington, and by and large, they tend not to facilitate that physician-patient relationship that is vital for the quality of healthcare in our country.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do we do? How do we fix it? I mean, where do we go from here?
Well, I mentioned the Empowering Patients First Act that I was privileged to be able to author and put in offer in Congress from about 2009 to when I left in 2017. But we've continued to work on that, and Job Creators Network has been at the forefront of this, and along with Physicians for Reform, came up with and I had the privilege. You asked me to assist in this. Had the privilege of being involved. Healthcare for You. And I would urge folks, if they haven't done so, they need to go to healthcareforyou.com and see what the positive solutions can be. The neat thing about Healthcare for You and about the thing that you and Elaine directed was that it's the only solutions-based program that I'm aware of that's been put forward that actually went to people and in all across the spectrum and said, what is it that you would want to see if you could write the bill and the program? What would you like to see? And no surprise, they came up with the kinds of things that we've been pushing for such a long period of time, and making certain the pre-existing illnesses are covered, that we make certain that all sorts of expansive programs are able to be in place to cover folks, whether it's short-term plans or association health plans, decreasing costs of premiums, making certain that folks are able to actually afford their health coverage, put in place personal health management accounts, things like HSAs, but that are even broader in their expansiveness and able to be covered. That direct medical care, that DPC model that allows patients and physicians to be able to be the ones that are actually controlling those decisions. The drug cost challenges that exist. This is a classic example of where Washington gets it wrong. This administration put in place what they believe would help solve the drug cost problem. The problem is that it would fix prices for medications. It would decrease innovation, and it would extort those companies out there to charge something that may or may not, likely not, cover the cost of innovation and research and development. All of these things can be addressed in a positive way, in a way that actually solves the problem as opposed to confounds it. And sadly, we've got an administration right now that believes that confounding it is where we need to be, as opposed to actually solving the problem.
Yeah.
Why are the Democrats so against allowing patients and doctors to make their own decision, injecting the free enterprise in there so that we can actually address the real cost of health care, which in my view, when you make something very complex like Obamacare is and bureaucratic, it's more expensive.
Yes.
If you take all that away and you get down to just the patient and the doctor, you get to a much less expensive relationship. Yep. And why would they be so against letting Americans be in charge of their own healthcare?
Yeah, it's a great question, Elaine. And I had the privilege, truly the privilege of serving with folks who believed that there was a better way to do it with the government in charge. And these folks are sincere about this. They're misguided. They're terribly misguided, I believe, and I know you do as well. But they simply believe that the government would make better decisions for people than people are able to make for themselves. And it's clear in the proposals that they put forward and the policies that they put forward that they actually believe this. And what the challenge that we have is making and helping people understand that that's the core of their belief system. When they talk about better health care and more affordable health care and all that, it always is with the government at the pivotal decision point making process. And the way they're going to hold down costs, if they had their druthers, is to fix prices, and they've demonstrated that with their price fixing program for drugs, which never holds down costs and will fundamentally harm the innovation and the wonderful healthcare that we've been able to have in this country. Now, there are problems with our healthcare system, don't get me wrong, but they can be solved by not putting the government in charge. There are solutions that don't require bureaucrats and other individuals and folks who frankly don't know a whit about healthcare, that would put in place policies that they believe are the best.
I think you said it best, though, Dr. Price, that it's a fundamental core belief and philosophy of the liberal of the Democrat Party, unfortunately, that government control is better than
Yes.
choice.
Yeah, exactly.
That they can actually decide better for what's for you, what's better for you than you can.
Yeah.
You look across the board in so many different industries, and the more government control that they have on healthcare, it seems to be the worse that it's getting. I mean,
That's right.
if you think about even the education system, right, which is again more government control, it's a disaster as well.
Exactly. And I used to try to point out the arrogance of that to some of my Democratic colleagues in the House. And they really, most of them don't see it that way at all. Otherwise, I don't think that they would put forward the programs that they do. But it's an arrogant position. It says, we know better than you do how to run your life. We know better than you do what doctor you ought to see. We know better than you do how a disease should be treated, in spite of the fact that we never went to medical school or never did any health study at all. And we see it over and over and over. And sadly, the conversation that is brought about and the presentation from the media and elsewhere, and even academia, the presentation is oftentimes such that you've got many in the public actually believing that to their own detriment. It doesn't make much sense.
Yeah. Education, for example, I mean, we're hearing all of this that, parents are no longer the ones that actually know what's best for their children, that it's actually the government and school officials that know better.
It just boggles the mind to even think that we've gotten to that spot where that's kind of the norm position for the left in our country politically, and they seem to be getting away with it, which is very frustrating, because you'd think that, and God bless the parents that stand up and battle and fight, because they're going to have to do it. I used to tell my healthcare colleagues, my doctor colleagues, that when they would say, when is this going to get better? And I used to say, look, it gets better when patients understand and appreciate that they actually have the power in this equation and fight for it, and instead of just taking what the federal government or the state government tells them they must have.
Well, thank goodness we've had 14 brave governors, Republican governors,
right,
I think, that have enacted educational savings accounts, to allow the money to actually follow the students, and have parents be able to find what's best for their children. We need to have more states really, I think, very quickly try to enact more of these what's called ESAs, education savings accounts.
Yeah. What a novel thought, huh? That parents ought to be in charge of their children's education.
Yeah.
And it stretches over to other things as well, not the least of which is healthcare. Parents ought to be the ones that are deciding basic things about who ought to be treating their child and how.
So, Dr. Price, the direction of the company of the country most Americans, I've seen polls as high as 70% of Americans think the country's going in the wrong direction. And yet we have an administration that is so anti-small business, and they're pro-union, but they're so anti-worker. I mean, what are your thoughts on the direction of the country and how we sort of turn this ship?
Well, obviously you can't continue to have a country that is vibrant and economically successful and allows for the greatest amount of opportunity, and hence success for all, if you continue down this road that we're on right now. It just won't happen. We'll end up with a social democratic government, or worse, that that makes decisions and decides what companies can do and decides what businesses are able to do and how many folks they're able to employ and what they have to do with those employees and what those employees are able to do on the job, instead of having a collaborative work process between employer and employee. When I started my profession in healthcare, I was an orthopedic surgeon and started my own practice when it was just me and two other individuals that I hired, and I signed the note at the bank to open the office. And everything that we did, and I grew that into a very large medical practice, orthopedic surgical practice, one of the largest in the country when I left it. But everything that we did throughout that process of that growth was a collaborative effort between the docs, the folks that were providing the care, and every other employee, because every employee in that business was important to the success of that business, every single one. And we knew that, and we knew that in order to have those employees be able to do the job that they were hired to do, that it required a collaborative effort. And that's what government never can understand. They can't understand that relationship. It's impossible for them to understand because they're not there on a daily basis. And so it's going to take folks recognizing that that's the case. The education process that you all are doing day in and day out is so incredibly important, but we need others. We need others to step up. There are folks that have wonderful titles out there in the business community that frankly aren't doing their job. And they aren't informing folks in a way that will allow the public policymakers to hear from their constituents in a way that would make them appreciate the kinds of solutions that are necessary. So it's a continued education process. And sadly, as you mentioned, the education system, Alfredo, kids aren't getting it in many schools these days. Not all. There are some that are doing a great job, but in many of the schools, and certainly the higher education institutions, they're not getting an education that will allow them to creatively and enthusiastically and appropriately solve these problems in a way that recognizes the fundamental nature of our free market system.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just amazing to me, just how they truly don't have an understanding, I think, of this free enterprise system, of how companies run. I mean, that profit isn't bad because, when you're a person that's putting your own capital on the table, your own, your home, your mortgaging, your credit card, everything that you have on an idea,
That's
right? That if you have profit, it's a bad thing. I mean, what the government doesn't seem to understand is that you can actually choose to close that business.
That's right.
When it's actually doesn't make sense for you to continue it anymore. So you hear about, for example, Elaine, you and I were just talking about in California that the minimum wage now for a restaurant worker is going to be, what was it, $20 an hour going up to 25?
I think it's 25.
The fast food arena. Yeah. I read that the other day as well.
I mean, you cannot afford a minimum wage worker, a 16-year-old kid flipping burgers, paying them $20 to $25 an hour.
It can't survive. And what that will do is businesses will either go out of business, or they'll find a robotic way to solve that problem, so that person not only doesn't make $20 an hour, they don't have a job.
Right.
And that's what these folks just don't appreciate. And when you look at, I don't know what it is in this administration, but in previous administrations from the Democrat Party, I know that the vast majority of individuals at the highest levels never ran a business. They never signed the front side of a paycheck. And so they just don't understand what it means to put all of that on the line. To as you say, mortgage your house, bet on your capabilities, bet on your the ingenuity that you have, and the hard work, the shoe leather that you're going to put into whatever business it is. The good news, Alfredo, out there that I see is that in the role that I currently serve, not publicly but privately, I'm helping a lot of healthcare companies across the country and literally across the world that are a lot of them are startups, and so these startup companies are full of all sorts of wonderfully enthusiastic and bright and passionate individuals who think they've got a solution to a particular problem in the health space. And they're as gung ho as you can imagine. And so I try to help them to succeed. But oftentimes, one of the things that gets in their way, if not many things that get in their way, is either the state or the federal government that puts in place roadblocks that makes it so that they're not able to do the kinds of things that they want. They have a passion to solve a problem.
Well, as you might recall, one of your colleagues, Secretary Acosta, Labor Secretary, had introduced the association health plans.
That's right.
Great idea for small businesses. Truly would reduce the cost of healthcare for our small businesses. And day one, it was challenged in the courts and basically stopped. I mean,
and what a better solution is there than allowing individuals of their voluntary choice to pool together,
right,
and purchase health coverage. What a novel idea, right? It's amazing.
Yeah, that would have been a game changer for our small businesses to have that kind of pooling power at the time, and to not even allow them to do that. It was incredible. I mean, we spoke out so hard on that and trying to help the public understand how important that would be. And the main word we used was game changer.
Right. And it would have, because you've got so many small businesses, and the cost of healthcare for so many small businesses is the second largest cost that they have, right behind the cost of labor itself. And so if that second cost continues to go up and up and up, then you can't expect small businesses to provide health coverage for their employees, even though they want to, unless you allow for a system that allows them to pool together with other small businesses. And that it's a wonderful program. It would work incredibly well and allow patients, employees to actually have the kind of health coverage that they want for themselves. And those are the kinds of things that are in healthcare for you.
Yeah. No, I know we were very disappointed when that actually was challenged and stopped in the courts, but it is just unbelievable, that probably the two leading, advocates for increasing minimum wage, one was a bartender and one never had a job other than being in Congress. Because when you actually break down and think about what they're trying to do, okay, so they're getting, let's say a person is flipping a burger, an extra $2-3 an hour. All right, so they're going from $12 to 15 hours. I asked them, are you fundamentally changing their lives by doing so, right? They're not giving them any extra skill sets. You're just giving them a couple extra bucks, which, by the way, as we know from inflation, actually just goes away because you're going to end up spending more money for less goods and services.
That's exactly
and right. So, if you recall this too, we did the Fight for 50, which is our response for the Fight for 15, which is $50,000 per year jobs through skills job training, right? HVAC technicians, electricians. I mean, plumber, journeymen. I mean, there's so many opportunities for these kids. I mean, the other day, actually, since you're in Roswell, you should go up to the Roswell up there, the Toyota dealership up in Roswell. I saw a big sign that says looking for mechanics, starting wage $45,000 to $130,000 for a mechanic.
Yeah.
That's quite a range.
It is, but based upon expertise, but the cost of labor and the specialization, the trade skills that are so necessary out there, and we don't seem to be able to enthuse our young people across this country to view that as a gainful position of employment, and a career choice. There's some efforts being done in that area, but not nearly enough.
Well, Dr. Price, we could go on for hours talking to you about all your experiences. Thank you for taking the time and joining our show today, Main Street Matters, America's Small Business Megaphone. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks ever so much, Elaine and Alfredo. Appreciate it, and encourage folks to look at healthcareforyou.com and see what the real solutions are for healthcare.
And please subscribe to the show at SalemPodcastNetwork.com or anywhere you get your podcast from.